This is Flameland, my short, cute, colorful 2D platformer, and this video is devlog number 6. Today we're talking about a major change to one of the characters, the addition of several mini-levels, and a UI overhaul. And if you stick around to the end, I'll talk a bit about where I think this game is going next. So first, the character. As I mentioned in the previous devlog, I think I'm about done with the levels, so it's time for me to start fine-tuning how the characters play. I've been making a lot of small tweaks, but the biggest change was to this character named Snow. His design was made to resemble a cave painting, and he had the stabby move with his spear, but as I kept developing, I became less satisfied with him. For one thing, his black spear blended into black backgrounds, making him hard to read. For another thing, it didn't make sense that he'd stop being able to stab when he ran out of energy. See, in Flameland, each character has this energy meter at the bottom that tells you how often you can use their power. It's a lot like ammo in a gun game, and it achieves much the same aim. By limiting the available attack power for each character, I can force the player to change characters more frequently. This is admittedly not originally why I implemented this system, but it is part of why I've kept the system around. The old Snow, with his spear, should be able to attack infinitely. It's not like the spear breaks or anything, so diegetically, it doesn't make sense that you can't stab with Snow after you run out of energy. Moreover, I wanted to update his look. I liked the cave painting aesthetic at first because it was so different, but I also think it looks a little sloppy, and maybe even too different. So back to the drawing board. I decided this character would not constantly hold a spear, but would actually make new icicle swords. That would explain why it took energy. It takes energy to make a new icicle sword. And when looking for a new design, I thought of the chubby Fuecoco from Pokemon. None of my other dragons were really chubby, but he's an ice dragon, so obviously he's snow-colored, so he doesn't look like Fuecoco. And if he's making icicles, he should probably have icicle spikes too. And oh no. He looks like Eerie from Super Mario World. I had even given him that dent in the arm because I was trying to make him look different, and I thought the extra arm length would help when I needed him to extend the arm overhead or outward. Well, I didn't mean to copy, and I don't think it looks too similar. Mine has legs, and is clearly an ice dragon. More important than the aesthetics, however, I wanted to do a moveset change. The aesthetics were actually just an excuse to do the moveset change, or the moveset change was an excuse to do an aesthetic change. I don't know, I wanted to change both. Snow previously could just do the stabby stab, but I wanted a combo slash. Yeah, like that. And I wanted to jump and slash, which I was copying from Kirby's Adventure, because of course I was, and I wanted a sword slam, which I think I copied from Link from Super Smash Bros. In testing the new moveset, I found I would sometimes hit attack before jump when I wanted to do a jump attack, so I created a grace period on the attack animation, during which you can turn it into a jump attack by jumping. And the sword slam was hard to use when you had to hit down and attack together, so I decided you can hit down during the jump attack to switch to a sword slam. And I'm really happy with how this came out. His moveset feels so much more versatile than it did before, and he really is just genuinely fun to play. Next, I started on the Dojo levels. But what are the Dojo levels? Well, I've been bouncing around ideas for a while about what will be in these buildings. The idea is that they are canonically ruins, since the story begins with the king seizing all the dragons, presumably after he raided and destroyed their town. But as you play through the story again and again, and as you unlock more dragons, or maybe find more exits, you will restore the buildings in the town, and they will become like extra options on the start menu. What I mean is, instead of a start menu, you will have this town in front of you, and you will go through doors to access different options. Already we have this door to the main game, and this door down here to the level select, which you unlock by beating the main game once. And in the future, I think this will turn into a bell tower, which will house a sound test room that you'll unlock by, I don't really know yet. And this one might be a library with things like a bestiary of all the enemies you killed, or maybe high scores, or information about those high scores. What are we talking about? Oh, right, the Dojo. The Dojo is one of these buildings in which you can get more extended, more in-depth tutorials that are built around the individual characters. I don't want a long tutorial at the beginning of the game when players are just trying to figure out how to control the characters and how to stay alive, but I do want players to eventually learn how to maximize their scores, and the Dojo is a perfect place for that. And for some dragons, it's hard to explain how to get the most out of their ability. Like, I love playing the balloon dragon because I think it's really fun to jump from balloon to cross large gaps, almost like skipping stones. But I'm worried players will think that the balloon dragon is just for reaching new heights, riding a balloon upward rather than jumping across balloons. I also added a wall jump to the Ouroboros' ability that I don't think is immediately obvious, and Wave's ability has some real quirks. Two come to mind. I accidentally programmed it so that you can jump out of a dash if you start that dash on the ground. That wasn't intentional, but it feels really good to use, and I kind of love it. So in his dojo level, I forced the player to learn that technique, and I intentionally programmed it so Wave would be invincible for a short time after his attack. Again, that was intentional. It prevents the player from misjudging a dash and coming out of the dash right in front of an enemy, only to die. However, there were unintended consequences to this programming that I thought were neat, like the fact that the dash now lets him go through saw blades. So I added that to the dojo level as well to try to make it look like that was intentional. I could fix the programming, but for now, I kind of like the quirk, and I'm gonna leave it in. We'll see if I change my mind later. Creating these dojo levels really let me try out each dragon's ability in depth, and so I got to reprogram the abilities that felt less comfortable to use. Like with Cobra, he's supposed to be invulnerable when standing still, but that meant he was still vulnerable while sliding to a halt. So I've reprogrammed it. Now he's invulnerable when your hands are off the movement keys and he is on the ground. Now you can abuse this generous programming and slide through obstacles, but that actually kind of feels fun. And more importantly, there's never a moment where you die as Cobra and you feel like it was unfair. Oh, but one negative thing. I bragged last devlog that there was a new unlockable mode. That mode was solo mode, and it would let you play as one dragon with 4 health instead of the normal 4 dragons with 1 health. Well, that mode is no longer unlockable. I thought it was a fun side mode, and I thought it would make a nice bonus for really engaging with the dojo. Or rather, because I really want players to engage with the dojo and discover the secrets of scoring, I thought an unlockable mode would serve as good motivation to do so. So now you unlock solo mode by getting A rank or above on all dojo levels. Don't worry, I think it's easier to achieve A rank in a dojo level than in a main level. However, in the current build, you cannot unlock all the characters, and so you cannot unlock all the dojo levels. And since you can't get A ranks in levels you can't unlock solo mode. It will be back, it's not gone forever, it's still technically programmed into the game. I just do not have a path for you to unlock it at this moment. And now the most exciting part, the UI overhaul. Click Confusion changed its fonts in an update, and I was annoyed at first because I still have more to write, and I can't write the new stuff in the same font I've been using. This is the new Tahoma 8, way too big, and none of the Tahomas match up to the former style. But well, I'd picked that initial font somewhat hastily, and as the project is getting more serious, it was a good opportunity to pick a font that I really liked and redo the text. And some of that text desperately needed to be redone, like Dragonfly's ability text was still referencing an old control scheme, and so it was a great opportunity to begin overhauling the font. Or so I thought. But Jake, who does the music, he has an eye for UI, and he told me that these mockups, they're all a mess. And he's right, there's so much information and a sort of weird hierarchy. So he mocked up some stuff for me and eventually suggested this, which I turned into this. It's so much better. The text and power bar are all aligned so it's easy to read them quickly. The power bar is bigger and easier to notice. The run meter and score are relegated to the side since they aren't as vital to read consistently, and in fact, I don't really want beginner players to notice them at all. And then I watched this video on Breath of the Wild's energy donut, and look, the energy donut is right there next to your character, so it's easy to see, and it shows you how much energy is depleting, and it disappears when you don't need to think about it, and I thought, I want to try that, and I did. I did it. I made one. But I'm not sure it works for this game. I made it so the donut only appears when you're using energy, so it kind of resembles the Breath of the Wild donut, but because in this game your energy only replenishes when you get a power-up, that means you do need to know what your energy is at all times. When you're considering using an ability, you need to know how much power you have left before you start using that ability. So I can't get rid of the power bar on the bottom, but that makes the donut feel redundant. So I put it in the start menu as an optional UI element that you can toggle on and off, and I've put it off by default, but feel free to experiment and let me know what you think. But something that did come out of this whole experience is that I liked how it showed how much energy you were depleting. So now I've added another part to the power bar. This kind of darker brown part shows you how much energy you've depleted since you've started using energy. It will disappear when you stop depleting your energy. But I'm hoping this will give players a better feel for how quickly different dragons use up their energy. The final UI change I've made is to the end of level scoring. I've changed the name combo bonus to speed bonus, and I've added these little icons next to the speed bonus and the time bonus to try to show players where they can find these in the HUD. Of course, hopefully the dojo levels will make this even more evident. Okay, that's all the new stuff, but I said I'd talk about future plans. As always, this is subject to change, but the big thing on my mind right now is a continue button. I'd like players who get a game over to be able to continue from the level they died in. I think this would make the game more beatable and friendly to beginners. I am wavering on this point, of course, because I think some of the initial fun in beating the game does come from perseverance, from overcoming the difficulty of getting to the end without a game over. But the games that have inspired Flameland the most, namely Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Adventure, were both very generous to the player, and I loved that about them. And I do want players to beat this game over and over, and it's not like that sense of accomplishment will be the same when you beat the game for the 10th time, or the 11th time, or the 100th time, and so maybe it's important that I recognize that this sense of accomplishment isn't really core to what the majority of the experience is meant to be. But then I run into this other problem. What about the player who, when they get to the next level, decides to die intentionally a bunch of times so they can get to the game over screen, click continue, and start the level fresh with all their health back? I think that process of intentionally dying to get to the game over screen would be inherently unfun, and I also think that giving the players all their health back would make some of the power-ups at the ends of levels meaningless. And then I think, well, that's easy. I'll just save the health and power you had at the end of each level, and if you click continue, it will reset your health and power to where they were when you started that level. So for example, if you beat level 1 with 2 lives, but then you die twice and end up at the game over screen, so you click continue to continue from level 2, when you restart level 2, you'd still only have those 2 lives. But then I worry about save scumming. I worry about the player who beats level 1 with 4 lives and then loses a single life in level 2 and is like, okay, but I want to beat level 2 with 4 lives, so they deliberately die and get to the game over screen so they can restart level 2 with 4 lives. I mean, that sounds even more unfun, because players are playing a level and constantly thinking about whether they should just cut their losses and go to the game over screen and restart that level. Of course, I could prevent this by limiting the number of continues, but then that really feels like it defeats the whole purpose for me. Like, I want to add continues to make it easier for anyone who wants to make it past the final boss. But if I make a limited number of continues, that means there's going to be some player who eventually gets a real game over, a real, no, you cannot continue from this point. And I think that game over would feel so much worse if they'd first used up a bunch of continues. Like right now, because there is no continue option, you get a real game over in roughly about 5 minutes. Really, a round of Flameland shouldn't take much longer than 5 to 10 minutes. But if there's, say, 3 continues, that round could take 20-25 minutes, and it feels a lot worse to lose the progress of 20-25 minutes of an attempt than it does to lose a 5-minute attempt. So it is very much unlimited continues or bust for me. Either attempts are unlimited in scope and players can retry as many times as they want, or they cannot retry at all so that attempts only last 5 minutes. So then there needs to be a penalty to discourage save scumming, but penalties feel bad, so I've started to think about it in the opposite way. Maybe there's a reward for beating the game without using any continues. Certainly there will be a score reward, maybe just a straight extra 50 points, or maybe the medals idea that I introduced in the last devlog, like maybe you can only earn medals in a run if you didn't use any continues. And maybe there'd be some extra reward, like a 30th secret dragon or an extra building in the town that you unlock by beating the game without continues. I don't know. And how could I know if I don't even know if I want a continue button? But this is one of the things that's been going around in my mind most recently, and something I'll probably continue to think about. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thank you so much for sticking around. If you want to try the current build of Flameland, you can find a link to it in the video description. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.